Before I begin reading this chapter, I just wanted to inform you that this chapter might be distressing to some readers. In particular, there is a moment where it talks about how a sailor forces a kiss on the young Joan. And this chapter is included, and I shall still read it because it is an important part of the book and an important part of our discussion later on. But I did want to warn viewers and readers just in case they might find it distressing. If you would like to continue listening to the chapter, please stay tuned. Chapter 6. A Dead Fish and a Squarehead's Kiss. I was 7 years old when I first met Fear, and what happened at that meeting and what followed did more to shape my character and life than anything I can remember. For I learned the important lesson that if I stuck to the code of the sea, never to squeal, no matter what happened, but to fight my own battles in my own way, I could win against odds, provided I licked Fear. It all came about through Stitches teaching me how to fish. Of course, careful old Stitches had too much sense to start me after deep-sea fish, for they are so heavy and powerful that one might have yanked me overboard before help could reach me. "You can practice getting the little ones first, skipper," he said, as he baited a line with a cockroach for me. "If you get a pull, take your line in easy." I fished every day for weeks and never got so much as a nibble. As I hadn't any luck deep-sea fishing, I tried casting my line in the harbor at Sydney. Father was ashore attending to bills of lading, and the crew were cleaning up the ship, painting, chipping paint, and reeving on new canvas. I felt a nibble. The line twitched, and I pulled with all my 7-year-old strength on it. On the hook was a flat fish about 6 inches long with a huge bulging eye. He wiggled and squirmed, but I got him in my fist and called to anyone who could hear to come and see my catch. Alex Svensson, a Norwegian sailor, who was hollystoning the poop deck, came over to look at my fish.
"Ain't he a whopper?"
I asked him, full of pride and enthusiasm. Svensson picked up the fish in his big paw and grunted a negative. "This is a bloody bullfish. It ain't no good to eat," he said, and he ground the fish under his heel and laughed at my tears of disappointment. No one ever fought my battles except myself, and this insult to my first catch was cause for war.
"That's my fish, you bloody squarehead!"
I shouted at him, as I grabbed my shining treasure and stuck it inside the bib of my overalls next to my skin.
"I'll kill you for making fun of my fish!"
And I kicked Svensson on the shins as hard as I could. But kicking a 6-foot Scandinavian on the shins with bare feet is not to be recommended. I only stubbed my toes, and the more I kicked, the more they hurt, and the louder Svensson laughed. Ordinarily he was vile-tempered, but now my helpless rage seemed to please him. "Say, you got a hell of a lot of spirit, ain't you?" He grinned in my face.
"You killed my fish! I'll kill you, do you hear? You just wait!"
"And now be a nice girl and don't get your temper up, and I'll give you a big box of candy." I was young enough for the prospect of candy to be a pacifier for any woe. My father never let me have any, and the rare occasions when the sailors sneaked to me made me regard heaven as the place where you got all the candy you wanted. Wiping away my tears with a fishy hand, I forced a smile.
"I bet you ain't got any candy,"
I challenged him. "Well, don't you squeal to Stitches or the old man, and I'll give you a whole box just for yourself." I promised him I wouldn't betray him, and he went forward to get it. I twisted up my fish line in a neat coil while I waited for him. Presently I saw him coming aft with something concealed behind his back.
"Where is it?"
I asked, a bit suspicious that he was only fooling me. Svensson looked up the deck to make sure no one was watching him. "Come down in the cabin. Some of these stool pigeons might squeal on you," he said.
"Hey, sailors ain't allowed in the after quarters,"
I protested. Svensson snarled something out of the corner of his mouth, and then he shook me by the shoulders. "Do you want this candy, or don't you?"
"Yes, I do."
"All right, then shut your trap and come down below." I followed him down into the chart room. He made no show of giving me any box of candy.
"Where is it?"
I asked. Svensson held out a 5-pound box of candy wrapped in shiny paper and tied with lots of pink ribbon. I grabbed for it. As I did so, he snatched it away just out of reach. "Oh, no you don't. Give me a kiss and you can have it."
"You said you'd give me the candy because you killed my fish."
I couldn't understand why he still held the candy as another bait. "Come on with the kiss or you don't get it," he insisted. I looked at his tobacco-stained mouth and the yellow stubs of teeth that showed when he spoke. He looked horrible to me, but it was a 5-pound box of candy, and it would be all my own, and I have never had a whole pound of candy in my life, and I thought it would be worth even kissing Svensson for. I pursed my lips to kiss him as I had kissed my father, my kittens, and seabirds.
"Here's the kiss,"
I said. He put his face down close to mine, and I remember how hot his breath was in my face. His mouth was twisted, and his eyes narrowed, and for years after, in every horrible dream I ever had, I saw Svensson's yellow teeth and narrowed eyes. I forgot the candy and turned to run. He made a noise in his throat like a snarling animal and grabbed me up in his arms. His face was against mine. He forced my mouth open and kissed me, horribly. One of his hairy arms nearly crushed my ribs, and his big paws patted over my body as I kicked and struggled. With his face against mine, I couldn't make a sound. I managed to get my fingers in his eyes and tried to push them in. Suddenly he dropped me so that I fell on the deck of the cabin, and he ran out of the chart room and up to the deck. I scrambled to my feet and scurried like a rat to my own cabin, slammed the door and threw myself in my bunk. There I beat my hands against the wall and bit into my straw pillow to keep from screaming. I don't know how long it was before I felt Father's hands shaking me. "For the love of Christ, what's the matter, Joan?" he kept saying over my muffled sobbing.
"Get out of here! I hate you! Get out of here! Get out!"
I screeched at him. I didn't want to be touched. I just wanted to hide in the dark somewhere to get away from the feeling of Svensson's kiss. Then I remembered the fish in my breast. I put my hand down and brought it out. When Father saw it, he asked, "Say, are you bawling over a dead fish?" He was annoyed at what he thought was my childish sentiment. I didn't have time to answer him, for he had left the cabin abruptly. I lay down again in the bunk, clasping my dead bullfish and shivering with fear. My father came back with a big can of Epsom salts. "Now, no more of this nonsense. What's the matter with you, anyway? Are you sick?"
"No, Father. I
couldn't finish, for I knew the penalty of squealing on anyone in a fight. Sailors don't do that. They take their beating, and settle with the offender at their leisure. I felt that if I told on Svensson, I wouldn't be fit to be a regular sailor, and it was Father himself who had drilled that code into me. "Answer me. Are you sick, or is this just a show of bad temper?"
I'm sick,"
I wailed in a weak voice. I knew what would follow. Father made me take a big dose of salts and then told me to go to bed. "You don't get any supper. You've probably been sneaking something to eat that wasn't good for you, so no food for you until you get your stomach cleaned up." I didn't mind swallowing the salts, for it got Father away from me, and I was afraid I would tell him the truth if he asked me many more questions or accused me of being a blubbering child. I didn't come out of my bunk all the next day. I stayed there with my fish. The fish began to smell bad, so Father took it away from me and threw it out of the porthole. That evening we sailed for the Midway Islands. I could hear the scuffling of the crew's feet on the poop deck above my cabin as they ran about setting the sails. The creak and groan of the rigging and the whistle of the wind through the sails gave me the creeps. Ordinarily, the sound of our ship getting under way thrilled me, and I wasn't content unless I could be on the deck helping pull the ropes. But I was afraid to go on deck. I heard Svensson's voice answering that of the mates as he took the helm, and I couldn't bear to see him again. When we had been out about a week, I ventured on the deck, after I had found out from the cabin boy that Svensson was on his watch below. I hated him, but I was going to repay him in full when I got my courage back. I knew to be a regular sailor I had to cure the sick feeling I got whenever Svensson was near. I had to quit being afraid. I had to get hunk without help. I couldn't even tell stitches. So I schemed, and I was so eager to get even that gradually I began to stop being afraid. The mate had switched Svensson into the second mate's watch because he wanted another sailor to fix some sails, and Svensson couldn't sail make, but he could steer. I found him at the wheel. Here was my chance. Just as I knew better than to squeal on him, I was sure he would not dare to squeal on me no matter what I did. Father had set a course. Northeast by east and a quarter point east, and had told Svensson to keep a true course, for we were in the region of some coral reefs, and a quarter of a mile off in navigation would run us aground. "Keep her full and by, and call me if the wind veers a point," Father instructed him, and then went below for a short nap. I knew if Svensson let that ship get even so much as a tenth of a point off the course, he would get hell from Father. Well, I'd help Svensson get his hell. I climbed on the binnacle box, the box that holds the compass, which was in front of the wheel, and I put my 2 feet over the compass so that Svensson couldn't see it to steer by. "Get the hell out of the way so I can see," he snarled at me.
You make me.
I shot back at him. If he took his hands off the helm, the rudder would spin around and the ship would be out of control.
Come on, make me get off this binnacle.
I invited him again. Svensson knew I had him. He lost his temper and began cursing me, but he kept to the wheel. I heard the topsails aloft begin to flap. The wind had caught them aback. The jibs and mainsails began to luff, and in vain Svensson spun the wheel to get the ship back on her course. Then it was my turn to laugh. I heard the mate on the forecastle head, where he was fixing a jib, bellow aft at Svensson to pull the goddamn ship back into the wind. The mate ran down the deck to help get her back on course. He wasn't fast enough, though, for Father, who had been watching his telltale compass over his bunk, was leaping up the companionway ladder to the poop. I ran to the windward rail and pretended I was interested in watching some schools of flying fish skim over the water. Father jerked the helm from Svensson's hand and spun it hard over to the leeward. With a slapping crash, the booms went over to the port tack, and he got her once more headed up the wind. "Joan, take this wheel," he ordered. I came over and took hold of its big spokes. "Show this cockeyed so-and-so sea louse how to steer a course," he said out of the corner of his mouth, and at that he grabbed Svensson. "Who the hell ever told you that you were a sailor? What do you mean by letting her run afoul in the wind?" he shouted in Svensson's face. "That ain't my fault, Captain," whispered back Svensson. "I couldn't help it." "Ah, you'll talk back to me, will you?" And Father sent him flying on the deck with a left uppercut. "Trying to run the goddamn ship on the reef for us, are you?" Svensson jumped to his feet and went for Father. "Why, you white-haired old bastard, I'll knock the so-and-so out of you." And he swung a fierce right to Father's head. Then the two of them wallowed around on the deck, punching and mauling each other in a bloody mess. I'll never forget the sound of the bones in Svensson's jaw crunching under Father's blows. "I've got enough," cried Svensson on his back, just as Father's upraised arm was about to put him to sleep. The mate, who was standing by with a belaying pin in his hand in case of real trouble, lifted the Norwegian to his feet. "Take him forward and put him in irons," Father ordered the mate. "And tell any of the crew in the forecastle to think that they can talk back to the captain of this ship that Svensson is only a sample of what'll happen to them." The mate had Svensson by the neck and the seat of his pants, marching him forward. Father called after them. "When that piece of ballast gets his eyes open again, I'll have Joan here show him how to steer a real ship." Svensson, however, was kept in irons and on rations of bread and water until we reached the Midway Islands, where Father discharged him in disgrace. I hadn't squealed, but I don't think Svensson, wherever he is today, feels that he got the best of it.